You're listening to this show, aside from a few morons. You're one of the people that recognizes that this country being established and built on the idea of the Enlightenment and unalienable rights, and the idea that citizens were allowed to have their own property and governments were not to rule over them. Then my next guest is going to be somebody you want to listen to. Caleb Kruckenberg, Litigation Counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance. How are you, Caleb?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well as well, and I was looking at your name, and I love it, and I don't know what year. I want to know, did you lose the Von in front of it? Because that's a great name.
I think you got to go back pretty far for that.
All right, but I'm gonna just for this interview, I'm gonna call you Von Kruckenberg, if that's all right. This decision by the CDC, I thought had to do with diseases. What the hell do they have to do in property? Now, I take this particularly to offense because I'm a real estate broker, and I love the idea of real estate, and I love the idea of Americanism. Are we to a point now when the CDC gets to decide what it's in control of?
Well, the CDC sure thinks so. And for those of you who don't know, back in September, the CDC issued an order telling everyone nationwide that no matter what, they're not allowed to evict tenants who aren't paying rent. And actually, it went even farther than that. It said that anybody who tries to evict a tenant who hasn't paid rent is now committing a crime if they go to state court and they use the state court eviction process. And, you know, my first reaction was just like you said, what the heck is CDC doing telling state courts how to operate? But unfortunately, since September, this order's been in effect nationwide, and according to the CDC, you are a criminal if you try to take your property back using the courts if someone stops paying you rent.
Yeah. Well, Caleb, I've been doing real estate management and representing groups that bought real estate in the Chicagoland area for the last 20 years, and I've been doing it in Florida region for the last 7. And to see the difference in the way the states took the position. So in the state of Illinois, they took that position rather aggressively, very early on. And they pretty much, you couldn't evict or any of that. What people don't understand, though, is at a certain point, that has ramifications on ownership. And are we just to a point now, in your opinion, Caleb, where the society is very comfortable deciding which people can afford to go broke and which ones can't?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that's exactly what the CDC did here. You know, they saw, as an agency, they decided there's a problem with people not being able to pay rent. And instead of letting Congress or someone else actually do something about it, and maybe that's rental assistance or something else, the agency just picked a winner and they picked a loser. And they said, look, if you own property and you've chosen to rent it out to other people, the pandemic's your problem, and, you know, you have to provide free housing to people. And, you know, the real problem here is most property owners who are landlords are small business owners. They, you know, most landlords have just a few properties.
Right. And we're working on a cap rate against leveraged debt. So when you obstruct that flow of income, ta-da, I got problems.
Yeah, and you know, I have clients who are stuck. You know, they have mortgages and they have to pay for utilities and upkeep and, you know, all the normal expenses. And I have a client right now who hasn't been paid any rent at all on one of his properties for more than a year. And, you know, he's $20,000. He's owed more than $20,000 in unpaid rent. And the whole time he's got to carry those costs. And, you know, I mean, this is really devastating for a lot of people around the country.
So there was a bright spot. There is a decision that kind of said you can't do that. Am I right?
Well, yes. And, you know, fortunately, there has been a lot of lawsuits. And, you know, I mentioned back in September, this order just kind of came out of nowhere, that the agency issued it. And my organization, the New Civil Liberties Alliance, we filed a lawsuit immediately. And I've been litigating this case since September, and a lot of other groups challenged it as well. And just last week, there was a federal judge in Washington, D.C., who said, really what I've been saying the whole time is that the CDC has no business doing this. And the judge invalidated the eviction moratorium nationwide. Unfortunately, she's put that decision on hold while the government appeals.
So I'm so fascinated with your group. I mean that because I've watched my entire life as groups have pretended to represent civil liberties, but in fact have worked to undermine them, the ACLU in particular. Are you shocked at the lack of challenges to the government overtaking the citizen's life?
I wouldn't say I'm shocked, but I'm disappointed. and look, my organization, we're called the New Civil Liberties Alliance, and the name is deliberate because we want to be really the alternative to something like the ACLU. Because, like you, we see the ACLU as they're not really protecting civil liberties. They're not doing what they say they're doing. And this is unfortunately just one example. I mean, my organization, we file lawsuits all over the country. We're involved in a ton of litigation because administrative agencies in particular, they go around violating people's civil rights all the time. And, today in the CDC context, they're telling people they're not allowed to use their property the way they see fit. They're not allowed to rent their property out. They have to give it away to somebody.
Now, what's the time frame you think that we'll know? This is a really big case because if this wins, we have a real bright spot.
Well, and so, as I said, the case in D.C. Has been stayed pending appeal. But I actually have a case right now that's on appeal in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. That's that case that I mentioned that we filed back in September. And I'm going to be arguing that case actually a week this coming Friday. And we're hoping for a decision very quickly out of that court. And, that I think is really a case to watch because that's going to be the first time that a court of appeals anywhere in the country has decided whether the CDC can really do this. And we're hopeful we'll get a ruling that says that this entire moratorium has been wrong from the beginning. It's illegal, and the agency just can't do that.
As a layperson who loves the idea of American law, I do. I was disappointed that there were not more suits when it came to the actions of the CDC, in particular their confusion, the misspeak on many things, and then all of a sudden these iron-fisted new rules. As this goes to vaccinations, I know that this is not what we're supposed to talk about, but I want to talk because I'm not going to get a chance to talk to somebody like you for a while. Can the CDC, in fact, mandate? Do they have the power to mandate, or will it be more of an assault through ticky-tack regulation?
Well, it's really hard to say. And I think if you look at the eviction moratorium as an example, this is the agency sticking its nose into something that it very clearly has no business doing. And, you look at their claimed source of authority. Basically, the CDC said we can do absolutely anything we want to if we think that it's for public safety. And so, on these sort of deeper questions about mask wearing or lockdowns, COVID lockdowns or vaccination and things like that, there's no doubt in my mind that the CDC thinks that it can tell absolutely every person in this country what to do on every single one of those topics. And whether that's really the case or not, we have to see until they try something. But I can tell you, I've already sued the CDC. I anticipate I will be suing them again in the future.
And when they use a word, I think most people are take it for granted when they call an emergency or a crisis time frame. That pretty much is the gauntlet where they're throwing down that they, under those terms of emergency actions, their powers are in fact broadened. I'm assuming that's their argument as to why what they're even going to rebut your argument against. Is that the way they're using it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, according to the CDC, we've been in an unending emergency since last March, and there's no end in sight. I mean, the CDC said originally the eviction order moratorium was from September to December of 2020. Then they extended it. Then they extended again. And they just extended it through June. And I'm sure they'll keep extending it because, once an agency has authority, and once they've taken this authority because of the emergency, they're never going to give it back, at least willingly.
No,
because
that's my fear.
It makes their life so easy.
There's so much atrocity in this particular example because the people that had Section 8 tenants never missed a rent payment. Their plan went on forever, which explains why so many investors and real estate people who are recipients of Section 8 housing are very political. And they spread that money around. They make sure politicians cut laws in order to give them a step up on the regular investor. Is there any recourse that landlords have against mortgage companies who are, in fact, hybrids of government because all of their mortgages are insured from the FDIC and from various government organizations? So ultimately, if you're going to put me into bankruptcy as an independent property owner, do I then have recourse against a mortgage company that knew what was happening and didn't seek for protection for me and themselves to go to the government and say, look, you shut down the flow of revenue. How's this guy supposed to pay his rent? Or is it just that is truly the hot potato? That's the guy without a seat in musical chairs. That's the person we've decided we can sacrifice.
Well, and I unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do to sort of get back what they've taken from us. But what we can do, and what I do every single day is I try to get the courts to step in, and I try to get them to step in early because, look, if I win this case, if all of these cases are successful in the end, my clients aren't going to get this money back. They're not going to get this time back. But hopefully we can get a court to recognize that this was just wrong from the very beginning and stop it from happening again. But no, there's very little we can do when the government does things like those.
It's an atrocity. Caleb, I'm going to ask you to come back after the verdict. I'm dying to know how it happens. I would love to get your take on it. I know you're going to be very busy with people, but I'm your favorite radio host. I think we've established that, and I'm the only one that calls you von Kruckenberg, which is the best name ever for attorneys. I also want to give you a little heads up because it's not a one-way street with me. I'm in the I'm in the property management business. And one of the things I used to do when this would happen is I would remind them that where they park their car was my private property. I started towing cars. That was my thing. And you'd be surprised how much guys want their cars back. And then what you do is you pay them to get it back. You say, here's $1,000, now get out. See, you got to always outthink them because if they're on the government, the odds are they're going to use that leverage. So just a little tip. Next time this happens, and it'll happen again. Caleb, I want to thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.